In this part of episode 10, let's talk about how to find a percent of a number. Now, to find a certain percent of a number, we're going to use the fact that this keyword of is referring to multiplication. To find a percent of a number, all that you have to do is multiply that number by that percent. Now, in order to be able to multiply the number by the percent in a calculator, the percent needs to be in a format that the calculator enjoys to work with. So first things first is to convert that percent to a decimal, because calculators find decimals the most easy kinds of numbers to work with. Once you have converted a percent to a decimal, all that you have to do to find a percent of a number is multiply that decimal by the number that you were given. So let me give you an example. Somebody says, what is 5% of 200? If I wanted to find 5% of 200, I would start by converting this percent to a decimal. So I will take that decimal point and I will move it 2 spaces to the left to make it smaller. And that gives me 0.05 as a decimal representation of this percent value. Then I'm going to take 0.05 of 200, remembering that the word of is talking about multiplication. So 0.05 times 200 is just 10. 10 is 5% of 200. Somebody says, what is 10% of 32? The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this percent number and I'm going to convert it to a decimal. So that'll give me 0.10. Multiply that by 32 in, for example, a calculator, and I get 3.2 from that calculation. Someone says, what is 11% of 14? So all I have to do is convert 11% to a decimal number to turn it into 0.11 and take that of 14 times 14. And I get 0.11 times 14, 1.54. And someone says, what is 50% of 16? Once again, move that decimal place to the left to turn this into a decimal number. Multiply by 16, and we get 0.5 times 16, resulting in 8. Now, there are a couple of very common percents that I think are worth learning how to do them manually without a calculator. If you want to figure out what is 100% of a number, 100% of a number is equivalent to, if I move this decimal place 2 units to the left, 1 times that number. And when you multiply a number by 1, it just stays the same. So 100% of a number is just the same number. So for example, if somebody asks you, what is 100% of 18? You don't even have to think about it. 100% of 18 is all of 18. The result of that is just 18. 50% is also a pretty special number. 50%, if you think about this as a fraction, is 50 out of 100. And if I reduce that fraction and simplify that fraction by dividing 50 out of the numerator and denominator, 50% is the same thing as 1/2. So if someone says 50% of the number, that's literally just half of that number. So if someone said to me, what's 50% of 12? All I have to do is cut 12 in half. Half of 12 is 6. So 50% of 12 is 6. Similarly, if someone said, what's 25%? If I think of 25% as a fraction, that would be 25 out of 100. And if I simplify that fraction, it'll become the number 1/4. So 1/4 is equivalent to 25%. And if I want to take 25% of a number, all I have to do is cut it into fours, or in other words, cut it in half twice. So for example, if someone says to me, what is 25% of 32? Then I would cut 32 in half twice. 32 in half once goes to 16. That in half again goes to 8. So 8 would be 25% of 32. And if someone says to you 10%, 10% of a number is equivalent to 10 out of 100. Or put another way, it is equivalent to 1/10. And so if I want 10% of a number, then that's equivalent to dividing by 10, which moves the decimal place 1 unit to the left to make it just a little bit smaller than it was before. So for example, if somebody says, what is 10% of 52? To calculate 10% of 52, all you have to do is go into 52 and move that decimal place 1 unit to the left. When we were dividing by 100, the decimal place got moved 2 units to the left because there are 2 zeros in 100. And when we are dividing by 10, which only has 1 0, we move the decimal place 1 unit to the left. 10% of a number, just move the decimal place 1 unit to the left. Let's do a couple of real-life examples of where percents show up. So someone says, you go to a restaurant, your order is 42.31%. And maybe you're the kind of person who tips 10% on an order. If you tip 10%, and this is how much your order is worth, how much would you tip? Well, 10% of 42 bucks. This special percent can be obtained by just scooching that decimal place 1 unit to the left in the number. So that would be 4.231. Now, we don't pay money where we have fractions of pennies, where we have 3 decimal places like we have here. So I would round this value, for example, to the nearest cent. I would round, for example, to maybe $4.23, or roughly speaking, $5 for your tip. For another example, we have an item that's originally worth $32 and it's 25% off. So if this item is on sale for 25% off, how much does the item cost now? So the amount that has been taken off the price is 25% of 32, which we remember 25% of 32 can be found by taking half of 32 twice. And if I take half of 32 twice, the result of that is 8. So I'm going to take $8 off the original price. I'm going to take my original price and subtract 8 from that. And if I subtract 8 from my original price, the result of that is $24. And so that is how much the item would be worth on sale. Now, for a slightly more complicated example, somebody says to me, okay, pizza dough. I make pizza every single Saturday. All of those pizza examples when we talked about fractions were no joke. I love pizza, and I make my own pizza from scratch every single week. Now, the pizza dough that I use, I make a pretty large pizza for me and my family. And so we put in 400 grams of flour. And then the recipe says however much flour you use to make your pizza dough, put in this amount of water that is equal to 55% of the weight of flour. So if I use 400 grams of flour and the amount of water should be 55% of that, how many grams of water do I need to add to make my pizza dough? So I need 55% of 400. And this is not one of our common percents. So I will convert this to a decimal and use the calculator to help me. If I do 0.55 times 400, then the result of that is 220 grams of water. And this, yes, this is the amount of water that I put in my pizza dough when I make it every single weekend for me and my family. 400 grams of flour, and then I measure out on a food scale 220 grams of water. And this is the foundation of Sam's personal pizza dough recipe. This is for real.